cheaters. They think they are smarter than all people in the world. They think that their deception will never be revealed. Why do they have secret affairs? After all, you can just get divorced and build a new relationship from scratch. But no, they want to have everything. But often the opposite happens. Greetings, my dear viewer. This is a story about how a husband unexpectedly returns from a business trip and finds his wife with the AP. It would seem an ordinary story, but no one expected what happened next. And so, let's get started. And you, my dear friend, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and put your most powerful like. My name is Charles Klein, and until October 6th, the most terrible day in my life was April 20th last year. That day, I returned home early from a business trip and found my wife of 6 years, the mother of our 5-year-old daughter, in bed with Trent Miller. I will tell you about the events of October 16th later. The realization of her infidelity was not entirely unexpected, as there were signs that Haley was unhappy with both me and our lifestyle. The effects of the recent economic downturn have had a serious impact on our financial situation. Having bought a house right before the collapse, we found ourselves in a difficult situation with a mortgage. Our debts exceeded the value of the house, which caused stress and anxiety. While Haley was thinking about giving up, I didn't give up hope that we could overcome this ordeal and eventually everything would get better. But what annoyed me most was that Haley insisted on keeping the house, despite the fact that we were postponing the purchase of a 4-bedroom mega mansion. Now she is unhappy that most of our income goes to the mortgage. After Christmas, when Haley became upset that her gift was not very successful, it became difficult to communicate with her. It seemed that nothing could make her happy, no matter what I did or said. The only joy in my life came from Tina, our daughter. Tina's face lightened when I came home from work, which was in stark contrast to the contemptuous expression on Haley's face. I'm not going to go into details about why I married Haley Turner. I regretted this decision from the very beginning. She was an amazing woman, at least outwardly. We both had the experience of failed relationships, and we were similar to each other. Looking around and seeing that all our friends are happily married, we couldn't help but wonder why we didn't find the same happiness. As a result, we found ourselves in front of the altar. Although our initial reasons for getting married might not have been the best, over time, my love for Haley increased, especially after the birth of our daughter Tina. While many couples have difficulties after having children, our bond seemed to have only grown stronger. It turned out that Haley was either an outstanding actress or was dealing with a mental disorder, and possibly both. Until the end of last year, I believed that our relationship and family were strong. How naive of me. I informed Haley that I would be back from a business trip on Thursday, but surprised her by arriving home on Wednesday. Since Haley worked in the mornings and our daughter Tina was at school, she had free days, and I decided to take a chance. Driving down our street, I noticed an unfamiliar car parked in front of the house. Haley's lack of caution was obvious, even though we didn't maintain close relationships with any of the neighbors. After the housing crisis, more than half of the streets remained deserted. When I entered the house, the noise from the master bedroom drowned out all the sounds I heard. I stood in silence, capturing the scene on my phone for a moment. Instead of feeling tense or angry, I was overcome with sadness when I realized that my marriage was over. Infidelity and betrayal of trust destroyed all hopes of reconciliation. Now the question arose about how chaotic my life would become after the divorce. Despite our already difficult financial situation, the situation had to change for the worse. Now I will only see my daughter part-time and will never be able to hug the woman I love or have an intimate relationship with her again. When I looked at Haley, she screamed in surprise, demanding that I leave. Shocked and offended, I attacked her, grabbed her by the hair and started shouting at her, calling her names. "How dare you ask why I came home earlier? You were in bed with that jerk while I was gone, and yet you have the audacity to confront me?" I didn't notice Trent standing behind me. In the midst of our argument, he quickly called the rescue service. While we were still yelling at each other, The police arrived. Trent met them at the door, still covered with a sheet. When they entered the bedroom, they found me pulling Haley's hair, but I was handcuffed and taken to jail. It took me a few days to raise the funds needed to make the deposit. During that time, our accounts were empty, and Haley disappeared with Tina. When I returned to our empty house, I was overcome by a feeling of loneliness. On Monday, when I returned to work, a bailiff met me in the lobby. Haley initiated the divorce proceedings, citing mental and physical effects. In response, I filed a counterclaim accusing her of adultery. Unfortunately, the court ruled in Haley's favor, granting her custody of our child and obliging me to pay alimony. After we lost the house, my credit history deteriorated dramatically and my life went downhill. Even though I still had a job, it felt like everything was falling apart. If it wasn't for Tina, I probably would have packed up and left town. The only advantage was that I was cleared of charges of adultery. Nevertheless, I spent most evenings at Johnny's Tavern listening to tipsy people criticize my situation. They made fun of me for not being able to stand up for myself and letting another man take my wife away from me. The last straw was that one evening I heard a group of regulars chanting "cuckoo, cuckoo, cuckoo" as I was leaving, and this forced me to find a new bar to avoid ridicule. I couldn't get rid of the feeling of disrespect. My colleagues at work, both men and women, looked at me with either pity or contempt. I began to remember the advice given to me by drunks, my former friends at Johnny's. They were very generous with hints and bravado. How should I take revenge on the couple who cheated on me and made my life hell? One Sunday when I had Tina, during our visit to her parents, Tina went to her room after dinner to watch TV, and my mom and dad joined me at the table to have coffee. I surprised them by telling them about the feeling of powerlessness and the need to regain their manhood. My father spoke up, asking if I wanted revenge. Not knowing, I replied that I just felt compelled to act. He warned me that revenge is a complex emotion that may seem pleasant, but often leaves a void in its wake. Retaliatory actions can quickly spiral out of control, involving friends and family members. The concept of an eye for an eye may seem attractive, but in reality, it often leads to escalation and further conflicts. My father was a wise man who always thought carefully about his actions before acting, and I admired his approach to solving problems. I didn't want to sink to the level of revenge and obsession with anger. Charles, I urge you not to give in to the temptation to take revenge. I raised you better than that. Let's put this in the past and remember that violence is rarely a solution to conflicts. Contrary to my father's warning, one Saturday evening, everything fell into place. As I was leaving the diner, I noticed Trent and Haley on the other side of the street coming out of a posh restaurant in the area. They exchanged a kiss while waiting for the valet to bring their car. A luxury Lexus pulled up, and they quickly climbed into it. As the car pulled away, Haley's head sank into Trent's lap. I walked over to my old Chevrolet and sat down in an armchair thinking about the scene that had played out in front of me. I let out a series of curses and slammed my fists on the steering wheel in frustration. After taking a few deep breaths to calm down, I turned the ignition key. The car I was driving, the only one I could afford now that my finances were in complete disarray, let out a faint squeak before finally starting up. It seemed to me that I had planned everything carefully. I thought I was pretty smart and took my time planning my actions. But a few weeks later, under the cover of night, I ran into Trent. Without thinking, I started hitting him. I wasn't going to kill him. I just wanted to seriously injure the man who kidnapped my wife. With every swing of the bat, I tried to hurt him. While he was lying on the ground trying to cover himself, I took aim at him again. A voice from the next house interrupted me, urging me to stop as the police were called. I quickly ran away, throwing the bat jacket and mask into a dumpster a few blocks from home. When I picked Tina up for a meeting later, Haley told me about the attack on Trent. I intended to make Haley sweat a little. She'll have to wait until I decide it's her turn. When she asked me a question, I just grinned, neither confirming nor denying anything, leaving her in suspense. Naturally, I became the main suspect, and was repeatedly interrogated by the police. I had no alibi. I claimed that I was alone in my apartment that evening. Since there were no witnesses who could prove otherwise and the weapon was never found, my innocence remained in question. There didn't seem to be any evidence linking me to the crime until one of Johnny's drunken patrons ran into trouble with the law. Trying to make a deal, he offered to help the authorities find the culprit in the attack on a man with a baseball bat. The police and the investigator agreed to the deal, and the drunk said he knew it was me. He falsely claimed that I boasted that I would kill the victim with a bat. Despite the dishonesty of the drunk, the police and the investigator did not seem to care. As a result, I was charged with aggravated assault and attempted murder. Due to limited financial resources, I was provided with a public defender. The prosecution relied heavily on circumstantial evidence and unreliable testimony from a man who was intoxicated. Despite the fact that by the beginning of the trial the jury had cleaned themselves up, they acquitted me of attempted murder, but found me guilty of aggravated assault. Despite my guilt in this case, I couldn't deny that I brutally attacked Trent with a bat. Nevertheless, a fortunate circumstance played in my favor. 3 months passed from the moment of the attack to the sentencing, and Trent's broken ribs managed to heal. Trent's broken arm and leg had already healed when he arrived for trial and sentencing, making him look less like a victim. Perhaps that's why the judge decided to give me a more lenient sentence. Despite this, I was still sentenced to 5 years in prison. But what could be worse than the day on October 16th when I found my wife with Trent? That was the day I had to come to terms with my cellmate, Ronald "Iron Ron" Young. I am not attracted to men, and I have never experienced repressed desires. But in that situation, I had no other choice. With no teeth, a broken nose, and 2 black eyes, I had no choice but to reluctantly enter into this prison relationship. Ron and his Aryan gang forced me, threatening me with death if I refused. Despite the terrible circumstances, there are also positive aspects. Ron keeps me with him, protecting me from other Aryan gangs and non-Aryan groups. But the situation is still vicious. How can culture justify such cruel punishments? I accept my sentence for the crime committed, but such treatment goes beyond cruelty. Having spent at least 5 years in prison, having experienced the loss of freedom and all the hardships that accompany it, it is impossible not to wonder why we shudder at the inhuman physical cruelty to which prisoners are subjected. Where is the concept of an eye for an eye? I have not committed such disgusting acts, so why am I forced to endure these bullies just to survive? Getting information from the inside is a difficult task. It took 6 long months and many letters before my mother finally visited me. My father still refused to talk to me, and my mother came not out of sympathy for my situation, but to vent her pent-up disappointment. After marrying Trent, Haley and her husband moved to Texas, interrupting all communication between Tina and her grandparents. Despite numerous attempts to contact them, they did not allow Tina to talk on the phone. Feeling desperate, Tina's grandparents called Haley's mother to ask for access to their granddaughter, but instead of sympathy, they received laughter. The cruelty shown by Haley's family is incomprehensible to Tina's grandparents, who have always tried to maintain a sense of justice and compassion. Despite the unfair treatment, Tina's grandparents assure themselves that they have always been faithful and honest in their relationship with Haley. She betrayed me. None of my letters to Tina have ever been read. I am currently cooperating with the prison lawyer in the hope that the judge will give me the opportunity to contact my daughter. Soon after, my mother's behavior changed. She saw how much I was in pain and began to show tenderness to her only child for the rest of the visit. I chose not to talk about the most difficult aspects of my time behind bars, and fortunately she didn't ask. Before she left, she swore that she would definitely visit me again. The details of those 5 years will remain untold. During my time in prison, I was unable to improve myself, did not acquire new skills, and did not become the best person in my life. Besides the disastrous parole hearing, I've learned to hide my true feelings and thoughts. Sitting in the same cell with Iron Ron, I took out my anger on him and his accomplices, Haley and Trent, working out tirelessly in the gym. I turned my short stature into a solid musculature. When Ron found a new cellmate in Kevin Johansson, I was left to fend for myself. When they came for me for the first time, 2 intruders violently attacked me, as a result of which they were hospitalized. As a result, I was placed in special housing for a month. Unfortunately, my first scheduled parole hearing fell at this time and was not rescheduled, resulting in a delay of 2 years before I had the opportunity to meet with the parole board again. During the meeting, I answered their questions for 20 minutes, after which I was speechless. I couldn't help myself, and finally spoke out when one insolent man asked why I hadn't apologized for the abuse of my ex-wife. All the anger and bitterness that had accumulated in me burst out when I explained that, despite the fact that I had been married to Haley for 6 years, I had never raised a hand against her. She was the one who betrayed me by having an affair in our own bed. The only thing I did was foolishly run into her boyfriend. As a result, in order to stay safe, I had to make peace with him, which led to numerous skirmishes in order not to be used to my advantage. The justice system allowed her to falsely accuse me of cruelty, confiscate all our property, and deprive me of the opportunity to hire a reliable lawyer. In addition, my ex-wife restricted my access to our daughter. As a result, I spent 5 years in prison without having any connection with the child. Despite the fact that I tried to defend Tina's well-being through legal means, my attempts were unsuccessful. Throughout these 5 years, I have been fighting tirelessly for my freedom. I may not have acquired any new legal knowledge during this time, but I undoubtedly understood the imperfection of the justice system more deeply. After learning how to manipulate the internet for financial gain, I found a night job loading trucks at a nearby warehouse to make ends meet. The salary was slightly higher than the minimum, and it was enough not to be homeless. With the money I saved during my time in prison, I devoted my days to perfecting my online personality, Amy Carson. Amy Carson was a fictional widow who dreamed of creating a humane shelter for abandoned pets. Through the Save Our Furry Friends website, I collected donations to support this cause. In 3 years, a large number of email addresses were collected, which guaranteed that potential donors would receive messages. The initial mailing did not require any expenses, but it brought good results, and the money arrived. Unfortunately, some checks and credit card details were obtained by the criminal abroad. 2 months later, I had accumulated $21,000, which was enough to achieve my first goal after my release from prison. Candy Sue was sitting at the bar and looked amazing. It's been more than 6 years since I've had intimacy with a woman. Wanting to fully immerse myself in this experience, I spared no expense. With a clean certificate from the clinic, $700 of money in my pocket, and a certificate in my hands, I was ready to pamper myself. After changing into trousers and a jacket, I went to Candy. Her smile lit up the dimly lit bar as she greeted me with an acquaintance. "Charles?" Surprisingly, she was wearing trousers, not a skirt, which only added to her attractiveness as a stunning girl with whom I was going to spend the night for only $600, plus tips. I had $700 in my pocket. Candy's prosthetic leg was cleverly hidden behind her trousers. It looks like other customers noticed her metal leg and demanded a discount. Personally, I didn't give a damn about her prosthetic, but I was glad to save a few extra dollars. I ordered a glass of bourbon from the bartender and sat down next to Candy, who was already sipping a drink in a martini glass. I glanced past her and noticed that the man on her right was staring at me intently. I didn't want the evening to start on a bad note. The man next to me offered to buy me a drink, but I politely declined, explaining that I was waiting for someone and did not need it. Candy put her hand on my shoulder, silently urging me to stay calm. Taking a deep breath, I mentally counted to 5 and took a $20 bill out of my wallet. "I am grateful to you for buying my friend a drink, but as a gentleman, I hope you will show the same courtesy to me." With that, I got up from my seat at the bar, clutching a $10 bill in my hand. I tried to hold it so that the scars on the back of my hand were visible, reminiscent of the battles I faced in prison. I wanted him to know that despite my polite words, I should not be underestimated. The man assessed me and, to my relief, grinned. He grinned and put a $20 bill in his pocket. You can't blame a guy for trying his luck with a beautiful woman, right? Have a nice evening. With that, he got up from his seat at the bar and walked to the opposite end. Candy looked at me gratefully. Thank you for everything going so smoothly. He wasn't too aggressive, and it would be unpleasant if our evening ended with you getting into trouble and me staying here. She paused, looking impressed. Where did you learn to diffuse the situation like that? It's too early to dig into my past, and I was advised not to ask escort girls personal questions. While we were discussing the booths, the bartender suddenly put my bourbon in front of me, saying that it was on the house. I expressed my gratitude for his kindness. Recently, we had a quarrel in the bar when a drunk refused to leave the companion of another client alone, resulting in damage of $400. Unfortunately, I will not receive compensation from the instigator, as my insurance exceeds the cost of repairs. I raised my glass to the bartender, appreciating the quality of the drink he poured me. After finishing our drinks, Candy and I said goodbye to the bartender and nodded to the rest of the customers, then went out into the cool night air. I have a room next door. Do you need anything to eat before we go there? I asked. No, I'm fine. Maybe we'll order pizza or Chinese food later, Candy replied. It's your money. We'll do whatever you want, she added. I didn't need to be told twice. I took Candy's hand and led her to the hotel. As we rode in the elevator, I couldn't wipe the silly grin off my face. I couldn't believe how stunning you are. Upon entering the room, we did not waste any time and immediately got down to business. After that, we took a break. It took me by surprise. Candy looked at me, surprised by my reaction. I didn't expect it to be so pleasant and that you would like it so much, I said with a laugh. Well, I'm experienced, she chuckled. She was still laughing, but not at my expense. This is the first time I've ever paid for something like this. I thought that people working in this profession treat it with luxury. I imagined that they had to play the role of a facade, but you turned out to be sincere. Thanks. Are you ready to place an order? While we were waiting for our Chinese food, we took a shower. It was at this time that I first noticed her prosthetic leg up close, almost at arm's length. After examining it, I saw that it was made of metal just below the knee. She broke the silence by asking, "Aren't you uncomfortable?" Surprisingly, no. I was shocked by the sight of the prosthetic leg, as I had never seen it before. It's really amazing when you think about it. When we entered the room, I didn't notice a hint of a limp in your step. After we made love and went to bed, we woke up the next morning and took a shower together. That's when Candy drew my attention to her prosthetic leg, which she explained was the result of a motorcycle accident. I was too polite to ask further, but she acknowledged the curiosity aroused by telling me how it happened. I was advised not to get personal, but since you're talking about it, I'll tell you how it all happened. The man I was dating at the time was named Randy. He had just bought a new motorcycle and really wanted to show it off. Randy bragged about his racing skills and claimed he knew exactly what he was doing. Naively, I agreed to ride behind. He was determined to impress me, so he started speeding up to show himself. Unfortunately, he lost control of the motorcycle and we both crashed. I lost my leg in the accident. As for Randy, I do not know what became of him. It was a rash decision on our part not to wear helmets. After hitting his head on a lamppost, he fell into a coma and lay unconscious for a week until it was decided to turn off the device that supports his life. Despite feeling guilty for his death, the reality is that he was the cause of the accident that caused me to lose my leg. To make matters worse, he had no insurance, and I found myself burdened with expensive medical bills and the cost of a prosthetic leg. This financial strain forced me to turn to intimate work as a means of survival, which eventually led to my parents finding out the truth and cutting me out of their lives. They couldn't accept that they had a daughter who resorted to such means to ensure financial stability, There are things worse than getting paid for making love. Which ones, you ask? Well, for example, my ex-wife. That's why I told Candy about Haley. After listening to my story, she agreed. My ex was an even bigger slut. Her comment made me laugh, which was the first time in this situation. Are you hungry? Do you want me to buy you breakfast? Yes, that would be great. After that, I have to go to class. I refuse to continue living in the same messy way as before. It is not uncommon for men to have feelings for employees in the field of intimate services, especially for such as Candy. But the truth is that she is a woman from the field of intimate services. Even if it wasn't, what could I offer any woman? The next day, I was looking forward to the next stage of my venture. I met Juan Price at one of the local eateries. Juan, the prison gang's go-between, offered a fee, which I agreed to on one condition. When the knife cuts his throat, he will hear two names whispered in his ear, mine and Johansson's. I agreed to this deal and handed over $15,000 to Juan. Juan, one of the brightest people I knew, was accused but never convicted. I was aware of the situation that was unfolding inside him. I understood the desire for justice, not revenge. Johansson, a good-natured guy, died a little more than a year after becoming Jung's companion. Ron held him in his arms for too long and eventually strangled him. Johansson, the victim, deserved more. As a result, Jung was sentenced to 2 months in solitary confinement for not reporting Johansson's death until the next morning. It was clear that he was dead now and had no chance of surviving. Both sides understood that their deal would remain a secret, which Yuen silently confessed before leaving the room. 4 days after the murder of Ariane Ronald, also known as Iron Ron Young, a riot broke out in the prison, as a result of which 4 prisoners died. One of the prisoners suspected of murder was among those who died during the riot, which closed the prison for 3 days. Amy Carlson's website has exhausted its resource, and I decided to close it before it attracted unwanted attention from law enforcement agencies. The case did not generate sufficient interest and did not receive sufficient funding for further investigation. Now my attention has shifted to the search for Tina. 2 years ago, Haley's Facebook page disappeared, leaving a message that their family lives in a Dallas suburb. Tina, who recently turned 11, beamed with her parents, Haley and Trent, in a photo taken at Disneyland. After that, there was a radio silence. To my amazement, a random Google search for Trent Miller revealed that he had returned to Chicago. Although there was no information about Haley, this new event gave me a potential lead for further action. A private investigator was hired, and it cost me a lot of money, obtained illegally, to find out Trent's current address, his place of work, and where he spends his time after work. Trent was stunned when he finally recognized me sitting on the bar stool next to him. It was understandable considering that I looked different than the last time he saw me. The last encounter occurred during sentencing for assaulting him with a fight, which resulted in me having a muscular build, a broken nose, and a shaved head, which probably contributed to my intimidating appearance. He looked at me and asked, "Do you think we're going to have any problems?" I've already thought about his question and prepared an answer. "No, Trent, I hit you with a baseball bat last time, and it was an unfortunate mistake. As a result, I spent 5 years in prison, endured countless horrors, and lost the joy of seeing my daughter grow up. I came to ask if you know where Tina is." He answered bluntly, "I would have told you if I had known. Haley left me for someone else, and the 3 of them left for an unknown destination." I looked at Trent as he spoke, his eyes focused and intense. "When you're in prison, you learn to look into the eyes, because the eyes are windows into the soul," he said. His words resonated with me, and I believed that he was sincere. Continuing, Trent confessed, "I want you to know something, Charles. I shouldn't have gotten into a relationship with Haley when she was still married to you. It was wrong. I genuinely cared about Haley and thought she felt the same way about me. When she left me for someone else, it was terrible. At that moment, I finally realized how much you were hurting. During lunch, she wove a web of deception, which I revealed only after talking with old acquaintances. When I first met Haley, she painted a dark picture of your marriage, accusing you of abusing her and Tina. She claimed that your relationship is a facade and predicted their imminent demise. Believing that I could save her, I was stunned when you proved that she was wrong by using cruelty. Despite my disagreement with Haley's decision to cut you and your family out of Tina's life, I couldn't deny the truth of your actions. Trent took a sip of beer and thought about the tangled web of lies that had unraveled before his eyes. I was stunned when Haley asked me to leave, insisting that Tina is not my child, and therefore I have no right to decide this issue. Despite the fact that Tina has become very attached to me over the past 3 years, deep down I knew that I was not her father. When I heard Trent mention how much Tina missed me, I had to hold back the tears, even though I felt my eyes getting bloodshot. Catching me off guard, Trent asked the bartender for a pen and paper. I do not know exactly where they ended up, but the joker who replaced them is Barry Stewart. He was a carpenter who was hired by a developer from Plano, Chase Homes, to work on special houses near our house. I have no idea how he and Haley crossed paths. The first time I heard about their relationship was when she packed her things into a truck and drove off with him. If it hadn't been for a nosy neighbor who called me to find out how Haley was loading things into the truck, I probably wouldn't even have found out about it. I got home just in time to see them leave. When the police arrived, a heated argument broke out between us. It was only then that I remembered his name and where he worked. The police had no reason to detain them, and they left. I found a note in the kitchen that just said goodbye. Our bank accounts were emptied. I spent a considerable amount of money trying to find Haley, but my efforts were in vain. A year later, I filed for divorce, citing adultery and abandonment, sold our house and moved to my current place of residence. There was bitterness in Trent's expression as he told his story. I still disliked this man. As for me, all I wanted was to be reunited with my daughter. Thanking Trent for sharing the information, I bought him a drink and left the bar, considering my next steps. Trent has invested a significant amount of money in the search for Haley. Should I do the same using my own limited resources? The only one who probably knew about Haley and Tina's whereabouts was Haley's mother. But she was just as likely to interfere with my attempts to find them. The stakes were high. If I got caught, I risked going back to prison. But I couldn't think of another plan. Margaret Turner was a creature of habit and always stuck to her routine. She attended church every Sunday at 9 in the morning. She always hid the spare key in an artificial stone near the door to the courtyard, despite the fact that her faithful Rottweiler Brutus guarded the house. When I climbed over the fence from the alley behind her house at 9:20, I found the key, opened the door to the patio, and heard Brutus growling. A menacing growl echoed through the kitchen, and it was enough to send a shiver down the spine of any layman. When Brutus turned the corner and met my gaze, I braced myself for what was about to happen. It's been 6 long years since Brutus last looked at me, but time hasn't dulled his memory. He stood up on his hind legs and greeted me by casually licking my face. It was obvious that Brutus remembered the man who had rescued him from the orphanage, brought him to Margaret's house, and showered him with love and treats at every visit. While he was getting to know my scent, I went over to the table where Margaret was handing me a treat from a cookie jar. I dropped the treat on the floor and watched as Brutus greedily grabbed it and then rushed to eat. Taking advantage of his distraction, I looked around the kitchen, noting that nothing had changed since the day John Turner died 9 years ago. There was still the computer on Margaret's desk where she used to pay bills. Curious, I turned on the computer, but a password prompt appeared on the screen. After thinking about it, I entered John and saw how the computer started to boot up. While I was waiting for it to fully launch, I rummaged through the drawers and found several letters with return addresses on the envelopes. While living in El Paso, Haley transferred photos from a USB drive and videos to Margaret's email from the USB port of her computer. I downloaded everything to a USB drive. After finishing my work, I turned off the computer, stroked the dog, closed the door, and put the key away. I spent the rest of the day watching videos and photos of my daughter Tina as a child. Seeing how much Tina has changed over the years, I couldn't help but regret missing out on these precious moments. After collecting information from envelopes and letters, I discovered that Haley and Tina now have the surname Turner. Haley lived with Barry Stewart, although they were not married. Tina was currently in 5th grade. The following Monday, I handed over the information, along with a $500 deposit, to a private investigator in El Paso, who made sure that the address and other details were still accurate. The next morning, after finishing work, I drove up to my parents' house and knocked on the door. If my mother visited me several times during my stay in prison, I have not seen my father since the day of sentencing. That day, he looked at me with a mixture of sadness and pain. Now that he was standing at the door, I couldn't help but wonder if he would welcome me inside. "Hi, Dad," I said softly. Dad opened the door and hugged me tightly, looking straight into my eyes. "Mary, Charles is at home," he said. Mom appeared in the doorway and joined the hug. "Would you like some coffee?" she asked. "Yes, please," I replied gratefully. We sat down at the familiar kitchen table, where I often enjoyed having lunch as a child. Like Margaret Turner, I found solace in routine. When I sat down at the table, I felt the full weight of my actions and realized that I had disappointed my parents. I apologized for not listening to their advice and allowing myself to be influenced by the wrong crowd. My mother came over and hugged me, and my father put a comforting hand on my shoulder. Despite my mistakes, I told them that I knew about the whereabouts of Haley and Tina and asked them to help me reconnect with Tina. I need to go to El Paso and do my best to qualify for a date. "Will you accompany me and help me?" My father was the first to respond. "What exactly do you mean?" I was offended that he doubted my intentions based on my past behavior. "No, I plan to consult with a lawyer first. I have served my time and have not been released on parole, so I can legally seek visitation rights through the judicial system. Let's be realistic. As an ex-convict convicted of assault, I believe it is in my best interest that my parents accompany me when we appeal together." When I suggested this idea, my father looked at my mother, and I saw despair in her eyes. She didn't have to say a word, and my father agreed to join us. "When should we leave? Will you be able to prepare in a week?" he asked. I explained that I needed to report to work and sort out some business before we could leave. "Do you mind if we use your car? We'll need transportation while we're there," I asked. "Of course, I'll take her to the mechanic tomorrow to make sure everything is ready for the trip," the father replied. "We'll leave on Monday, okay?" I said, taking a sip of coffee and looking through the family news. It was nice to be back in the city. In the days that followed, I spent my free time studying the best family lawyers in El Paso. After finding one of them with excellent reviews, I made an appointment for Thursday. That gave us 3 days to get to El Paso. I was hoping that my parents, who are already elderly, would join me. It turned out that my mom is a big fan of Matthew McConaughey, so the car we went on the trip in would have been perfect for her. But when my father found out about the meeting scheduled for Thursday, we decided to leave on Sunday to get an extra day to overcome the road. So that Sunday, my 36-year-old self went on a trip with her parents nearby. As we drove out of town, I couldn't help but think that the highway we're driving on now was once Route 610-6. As we approached St. Louis, my father recalled his childhood, telling how his parents drove along the same road to Los Angeles when he was only 3 years old. Previously, all roads were only 2 lanes wide, which limited movement. It took the family 7 days to get to Los Angeles, where my grandfather was waiting for a job opportunity. His army friend, who was in the painting business, promised him a job in all the new buildings that were being built after the war. Despite the opportunity to succeed, my grandmother was homesick for the entire year she spent in Pasadena, as my father told me. After my grandfather decided to move the family back to Racine, everything changed for the better. Eventually, he became the CEO of an aluminum plant and achieved success in his career. Nevertheless, a tragedy occurred when he was found lifeless at his desk. At a young age, he suffered a fatal heart attack. A year later, I was born, and as a sign of respect, I was given his name. During the 4-day car ride, my parents told countless stories from the past memories that I either forgot or didn't appreciate as a child. When I turned 18, I decided to leave Racine. The longest time we've spent together since our last vacation when I was 14 was on Thursday, when we went to Washington to visit Gladys Harper's law office. Unlike my previous experience with the law, this meeting turned out to be surprisingly positive. I was extremely honest with the lawyer, telling her about my conviction, my time in prison, my lack of communication with Tina and my parents, my divorce from Haley, her remarriage, and divorce from Trent. The lawyer's face lit up with enthusiasm when he learned that Trent had filed a lawsuit for adultery and abandonment of the child. Although this news didn't paint a very flattering picture, it also didn't present Haley as guiltless of guilt. All the lawyer's initial hesitation about our case disappeared when my mother explained with tears in her eyes that she could not accept the thought of losing her granddaughter. After making a deposit, the lawyer immediately began to prepare the necessary documents. We could only wait. We decided not to spend the weekend in El Paso and instead went on another trip to Big Bend National Park. Although our thoughts were on the recent events in El Paso, we spent a wonderful weekend exploring the serene and picturesque park along the Rio Grande River. Just 4 days later, Miss Harper's secretary called me and asked me to meet her at the office on Tuesday morning to prepare for the hearing before the judge, which will take place on the same day. Miss Harper was clearly busy as she already had a signed statement from Trent Miller detailing how Haley ended their relationship and severed ties with Tina. Then I found out that Trent agreed to help on one condition. Tina must be informed that he had not ended their relationship and that he still cared about her. We gathered again in the lobby of the courthouse and then headed to the judge's office. In the first few minutes, I was not deceived by the seemingly friendly atmosphere between the judge and our lawyer. We answered the judge's questions, and Miss Harper emphasized that our current goal is simply to arrange a first meeting with Tina in order to restore the relationship. We were ready to invite a court-appointed social worker to the meeting. Miss Harper told the judge that because Miss Turner had prevented contact with clients' children in the past, we asked that Haley Turner not be informed of the meeting. It was believed that she would use this information to delay the meeting and influence Tina against the clients. This decision turned out to be useful because our working relationship with Harper and the money we paid her paid off. I was completely shocked when the judge approved the request and made an appointment for the next day. According to the plan, we were supposed to pick Tina up from school after receiving the judge's order, along with Miss Harper and a social worker. We had 3 hours to take Tina to a nearby cafe and chat with her before bringing her home. When I walked out of the courthouse into the sunny Texas weather, I felt a sense of joy and relief that I had never felt before. I had to resist the urge to hug Miss Harper on the spot. She informed me that she was already preparing the necessary documents to establish visitation rights for both me and my parents. We agreed to meet tomorrow at lunch in my office. A social worker will accompany you to school where we will pick up Tina. After that, I'll leave you in the care of a social worker until Tina is safe at home. I urge you to avoid any actions that could jeopardize our progress until our meeting tomorrow. Please keep your mind clear and calm. It is very important that you remain calm and composed, especially when it comes to the reaction of Tina's mother. We expect that in the presence of a social worker, she will do or say something that will benefit us when we ask her for a visit. Treat the social worker like a friend, because he can become one when the case returns to court. The judge has given us a valuable opportunity, so we must treat it accordingly. With that, she left. I hugged my parents and thanked them once again for their help. The next 22 hours seemed like an eternity to me. We stayed at the hotel and had a snack at the diner across the street. Part of me was tensely expecting something negative. While we were wondering if Tina would be absent from school the next day, my parents tried to comfort me, although their concern was obvious. At 1:30, we got to Gladys Harper's office. Soon, a Spanish-speaking woman named Marie Hernandez came out to us. She assured us that she would conduct surveillance unnoticed, having already read the petitions of our lawyer. Her attitude towards my mother was warm and kind, almost like my grandmother's. Mrs. Hernandez kindly advised us how to deal with Tina after a long and traumatic separation. We were grateful for her advice, as I was worried about how Tina would react to seeing me again. Half an hour before lights out, we went to the administrative office of the school, where the principal and deputy principal got acquainted with the court decision and contacted the district office and the legal department. After receiving permission, Tina was brought to the office of the deputy director just before the end of the school day. The first person Tina saw was my mom, and her eyes sparkled with recognition when she saw her grandmother. Tina immediately threw herself into Grandma's arms, and my mom knelt down to hug her, and tears streamed down her face. Tina looked up when she saw my father approaching them. "Dad!" she exclaimed. When Tina first learned to speak, she still couldn't pronounce the word grandfather in its entirety. Everyone started calling him Dad. It became his nickname. We all found him affectionate. Dad hugged Tina, snuggled up to her, and kissed her on the nose. Tina looked at me, who was standing nearby. Her uncertainty was understandable, considering how much I had changed since our last meeting. It was a subtle reminder to Mrs. Hernandez that Tina had to reunite with her grandparents first, because they still looked the same as they had 5 years ago. There is always a unique connection with grandparents that cannot be repeated. Kneeling down and holding out my arms, I silently prayed that my embrace would be accepted. Tina immediately hugged me, interrupting our reunion when the deputy director entered the room with Haley in tow. Haley, who was waiting in the school parking lot to pick up Tina, burst into the office demanding answers. Confused and angry, she demanded to know why we were all here and insisted that Tina be left alone. When Miss Harper and Mrs. Hernandez entered the room, Miss Harper handed Haley a copy of the court order. "Miss Turner, according to this court order, Tina's father, grandmother, and grandfather can visit her for 3 hours today," Miss Harper explained. "Mrs. Hernandez will accompany them to ensure Tina's safety and their compliance with the order to return Tina to you on time, starting today." Although Haley glanced at the papers, she immediately tossed them back to Miss Harper. "I don't care about these papers. You can't just barge in here and take my daughter," Haley exclaimed, pointing at me and my parents. "These people have no right to be here. She's my daughter." Tina clung to her grandmother, trying to hide behind my mom's back. Mrs. Hernandez, standing in front of Haley, noticed the tension in the room. "Miss Turner!" She tried to intervene, but Haley interrupted her by hurling an insult about Mrs. Hernandez's nationality. Miss Turner's body language and her threatening words made us all uncomfortable. "Miss Turner, should I call the police?" I asked, warning her of the consequences of her behavior. I made it clear that if she continued her threats, she would be taken to jail until she calmed down. At that moment, the deputy principal of the school intervened, trying to defuse the situation and calm Haley down. Distracted, Tina, Mrs. Hernandez, and I slipped away and took refuge in a nearby cafe. Mrs. Hernandez sat at the next table and watched us while we tried to sort out the tense situation we had just escaped from. Mrs. Hernandez gave us valuable advice on how to restore relations with Tina after a long separation. Following her instructions, we confidently approached Tina, and it had a noticeable effect. Tina didn't look stunned by our sudden presence, but my heart sank when my daughter tearfully asked, "Dad, why didn't you ever lend me a helping hand and send me postcards for my birthdays?" Fortunately, I was ready for this moment and took out a large manila envelope from my mother's purse. "Every day when we were apart, thoughts of you consumed me. I diligently sent letters, postcards, and cards, but your mother returned them back. She made it clear that she doesn't want me or your grandparents in your life. I even applied for legal help twice, trying to establish contact with you." I showed Tina the envelopes, each of which had "Return to Sender" written on it in Haley's handwriting. But when you asked why she did that, I restrained myself from saying what I really felt, that your mother's actions were unfair. I gently took her hand and reassured her. Someday, you will need to talk about this with your mother, but not today. Today, let's just chat together. You, me, your grandparents. We all care about you and want to know how you're doing at school. What are your friends' names? Do you do sports? The time flew by unnoticed during the conversations. In the end, the 5 of us climbed into Dad's Lincoln and drove to Haley's house, arriving on time. When we arrived at the house, we saw Haley on the porch, smoking a cigarette and looking angry. I parked the car at the curb, and from the back seat, Tina said, "I want to show you my room." Looking at Haley standing on the porch, I hesitated before replying to Tina, "I'm not sure that's a good idea today. Your mom doesn't seem too happy about our presence in your house." Tina looked offended by my words, so her mom stepped in and suggested, "Why don't you show me your room today, Tina? We can all see her next time." Reluctantly, Tina agreed to this compromise. Mrs. Hernandez insisted on accompanying them, adding, "I need to be with all of you, Tina." Mrs. Hernandez and Tina got out of the back seat and headed for the porch. Despite the heated exchange that Dad and I couldn't make out, Mrs. Hernandez looked even more intimidating than Haley. Soon, Mom, Mrs. Hernandez, and Tina entered the house, leaving Haley on the porch, where she was looking at Dad and me. She even tried to trip us up. I still don't know why Haley dislikes me so much. We stood there for about 10 minutes until 2 patrol cars pulled up. As we were sitting in the car, one officer appeared in front of us and the other stood behind us. For a moment, I felt a surge of panic. Maybe it turned out that my hit-and-run incident with Ronald Young was solved? Or has someone revealed my involvement in a fake internet scam? Just when I was on the verge of reuniting with my daughter, the following happened. 4 police officers got out of their patrol cars, and Barry Stewart pulled into the driveway and hurried to the porch. Mrs. Hernandez met them at the front door, and Dad and I watched as the cops handcuffed Haley and Barry. Confusion and shock overwhelmed us as we tried to make sense of what was happening. I had the urge to jump out of the car, but Dad held me back. "I'll go check it out, Charles, and you stay where you are," he said firmly. It was not a request, but an order. Just as Dad was about to get out of the car, Mom came out of the house, hurried to the car, and slid into the back seat. Meanwhile, Barry and Haley, accompanied by 2 policemen, were put into a patrol car. One officer stayed on the porch, while the other entered the house with Mrs. Hernandez. They left the house with Tina in their arms. "Mom, what's going on?" I asked. I do not know exactly what happened, but Mrs. Hernandez was in Tina's room and found a toy on her shelf. She asked Tina a few questions that I didn't hear, and then called the police. She asked 2 patrol cars to come quickly. Mrs. Hernandez came up to our car and informed us that Tina was going to the station with her for questioning. "Please contact Mrs. Harper and ask her to meet us at the designated location. Most likely, Tina will stay with the family of social services until the situation is resolved." I asked what needs to be sorted out and what's going on, but we don't have all the details yet. Although we do not believe that Tina was harmed, suspicious objects were found in her room which gave rise to a police investigation. In the meantime, Tina will be under my care, and I assure you that she will be safe. I ask you to be patient and trust me, as I am solely focused on Tina's well-being. Please call Mrs. Harper. After 3 weeks of investigation, we finally put the whole story together thanks to Gladys Harper's experience. When Mrs. Hernandez found a stuffed animal on Tina's shelf that turned out to be a hidden camera, she wasted no time contacting the police. This discovery led to the issuance of a search warrant, which resulted in evidence being found on Barry's computer. Surprisingly, it turned out that Haley was completely unaware of Barry's espionage activities. Unfortunately, Mrs. Hernandez inadvertently repeated Haley's words at school, which led to even more confusion and chaos. Mrs. Hernandez, a woman of large build and unattractive appearance, was described as a lecherous woman originally from Mexico. Despite Judge Torres's attempts to appear indifferent, Haley could not ignore the unfair treatment she received from Miss Harper, who denied her the right to visit. 2 months after moving to Texas, Haley found herself riding in her father's car, with Tina sitting next to her mother. On the advice of a therapist, they even allowed Trent to attend Tina's 11th birthday. The therapist advised them to include forgiveness in their plan, which included limiting Haley's mother's contact with Tina. These conditions caused me difficulties, but talking to Tina's therapist helped me realize that it was in Tina's best interests. The hardest part was when Haley returned to town, and we allowed Tina to visit her mother several times at her grandmother's house, until an unexpected call came from Margaret Turner. "I'm really sorry to have to say this, but I have to tell you something. Haley said terrible things about you, Charles. I find it hard to believe that I've raised a child who can behave like this. It's heartbreaking, but I don't want to be cut off from my granddaughter because of Haley's behavior. I don't think Haley should be around Tina anymore." After hearing this, Haley was no longer allowed to see Tina, and she even lost all custody rights in court. The whole situation was truly terrible. Haley used vulgar language and threats against all of us, including Tina and Margaret. When the lawyer escorted her out of the courtroom, I couldn't help feeling awkward about the spectacle that our family life had turned into. It was like a chaotic episode of the Jerry Springer Show. Haley constantly violated the judge's orders, made scenes in our house, appeared at odd hours, and ignored the restraining order that we handed her. She would tirelessly knock on our door if we didn't answer. Even after a weekend spent in prison didn't help stop her behavior. Frustrated by the lack of police intervention, I realized that I needed to try a different approach. Once again, I found myself sitting across from Yvonne Price in a downtown diner. There was a large amount of money lying next to Haley. $2,000 had a tangible weight, but $10,000 had an indelible impact. I didn't mean her any harm. I just wanted her to leave quietly. So we decided to kindly ask her to leave the city. Ivan took the envelope and left. It didn't come as a shock to me when I found out that Haley returned to Texas 2 weeks later. But a year later, I was shocked to learn that she had moved back in with Barry Stewart after his parole. From the latest news I received from Margaret, I learned that she and Barry moved to Nicaragua after his escape from prison. I discussed Haley with Tina's therapist, who explained that it was impossible to diagnose her from a third-person perspective. But judging by her actions, she most likely suffers from one or more psychoses. I felt relieved that this woman had disappeared from my life for a while. In the midst of all this chaos, I discovered that I had acquired a valuable skill during my time in prison, and my father provided me with the necessary funds for its further development. After opening a small store in the mall, I focused on creating websites and repairing personal computers. Because of the criminal record, it was not easy to find a job, but running your own business turned out to be successful. Despite the lack of customer checks, I have always acted ethically. This allowed me to earn a stable income for a year, covering the cost of renting a house and providing for Tina and myself. It's been 4 years since I started my business. For the last 3 years, Tina has accompanied me on jogging and cycling trips. Thanks to her determination and talent, she strives to become the best middle-distance runner. A high school athletics coach has noticed Tina's potential and is closely monitoring her progress. It is quite possible that next year, as a second grader, Tina will participate in competitions at the secondary school level. Last Saturday morning, Tina and I took part in a fun run at Crystal Lake, spending the whole day on a bike and a treadmill. The event included a challenging bike trail, followed by a race. Throughout the bike ride, Tina and I stuck together, supporting each other along the way. At the last stage, we followed a fast-running woman, encouraging ourselves to keep up with her. Even with one prosthetic leg, Tina admired the courage of a woman participating in such an ordeal. She reminded me of Candy in some ways, but with short brown hair and a prosthetic leg that didn't look like Candy's at all. As we passed her, I couldn't bring myself to look at her face, feeling awkward from the memories of that night with Candy. Now that my daughter was with me, there was no time to be distracted. Switching from cycling to running, Tina and I approached the finish line in 42 minutes, but we were overtaken by a woman who crossed the finish line before us. While we were catching our breath, Tina approached the woman and introduced herself. The woman, who was standing with her back to me, graciously accepted Tina's outstretched hand. "It was amazing, thank you," she said. Tina kept walking and talking, and I held back, not wanting to interrupt her. Tina tends to make new friends wherever she goes. Lately, she's been trying to date me more often and strike up conversations with strange women. After a short pause, they stopped and turned their attention to me. The face that greeted me is forever etched in my memory. "This is my father, Charles Klein," she introduced. "Dad, meet Casey Sweeney." At first, Casey, now known as Candy, looked at me with slight confusion, but then a spark of recognition lit up in her eyes. "Nice to meet you, Casey," I greeted, shaking her hand. Then I turned around and said I wanted to go to my favorite snack bar by the river. Casey happily agreed to join us, and we laughed at the prospect. "That sounds great," I added. "We're going to the Broken Oar, have you heard of it?" I asked Casey. Without wasting a minute, she recalled our first meeting and its reasons. "Maybe I'll let the two of you stay with the father and daughter. I'll take a break," she suggested. "That's very thoughtful of you, Casey, but we've been together all week anyway," I replied. "I think Tina will appreciate the company of another woman for a change. Please don't let Tina or me down. Join us." "Are you sure?" I hesitated. "Do I need to beg?" "If Dad doesn't want to go, then I'll go," Casey assured us. "Please come with us." Casey's smile was warm and inviting. "Okay, I'll meet you there," I replied. While Tina and I loaded the bikes into the car, I silently prayed that Casey would not leave us and really show up at the Broken Trough. To my relief, she did arrive, and for the next half hour I watched them chatting over snacks like long-lost friends, while I enjoyed a hamburger and beer at the table. Tina was thrilled to learn that Casey graduated from the Art Institute with a degree in photography. Tina's favorite museum in Chicago is the Art Institute, and her main school subject is art. After listening to the conversation, I found out that Casey works as an online catalog photographer for a marketing company. Many small retail companies that do not have their own staff usually involve agencies like the one Casey works for to create their store websites. Before their conversation could continue, a young guy approached Tina and invited her to join a game of beans with his friends. Tina asked Casey and me for permission. "Of course, it would be great to talk to your father." I nodded in agreement when Tina left with a young guy. I watched her go, glad that I could still see her. "You're going to have a lot of worries," she said. "She's growing up to be a wonderful girl." "Yes, but she's also very smart and responsible," I replied. "I trust her." "Thank you for letting me go with both of you. I didn't know what to expect when you recognized me. I'm glad you found out." I've never seen Tina get attached to someone as quickly as it happened to you. It made me realize something. When I was working, I never reacted to men the way you do. The way you talked to that man in the bar, and the way you treated me with respect that night. Why didn't you ever come to me again? I was hoping you'd turn around. Nevertheless, I decided to be honest with her. First of all, I had to deal with my reunion with Tina. And when I turned into a single parent, my attention shifted to our relationship and Tina's well-being. After my recent release from prison, I found myself attracted to you. I was fascinated by your beauty. It would be too easy to guess my feelings for you. But you didn't dare fall in love with a woman with my past. I've never called you slutty or thought of you that way. I'm sorry if it sounded like that. Are you still working as an escort? I preferred to use a more respectful term for Casey's profession. No, not since I graduated from university and found this job. Now I have a stable income and medical insurance. I quit the same day I was hired. My medical expenses have been taken care of, and now I have a new leg. How are your parents? I remember there was some distance between you and them. You have a sharp memory. Mom and I are talking right now. My father still can't come to terms with the fact that I've been selling myself for a year and a half. He said it was better to mortgage their house and empty his account, but I would never be able to bail them out. It had been 3 years since my last date, and Dad seemed eager to forget that difficult period in our lives as soon as possible. Casey and I spent the rest of the hour chatting about Tina and our work. When Tina returned to our table, it was time to leave. I asked Casey if she could come over for dinner next weekend, feeling grateful for her smart daughter. This dinner marked the beginning of a series of dinners, dates, and, eventually, novels. Casey and I have been in a relationship for just over a year. I'm thinking of proposing to her, and Tina is totally supportive of the idea. She adores Casey, and they have a strong relationship as best friends. Before I propose to Casey, I plan to enlist her father's blessing. I hope this gesture will help their slow reconciliation. Like many fathers, Casey's father is concerned about my admission that Casey has provided intimate services in the past. Nevertheless, after many heartfelt conversations, Casey and I came to an understanding. We both value fidelity in marriage above all else and believe that our obligations to each other are unshakable. Someone might criticize my decision to marry a former escort and introduce her to my daughter, calling me a fool. But let me share one story. 2 years before that eventful day in Crystal Lake, I was in a serious relationship with a kind woman. When she asked about my missing front teeth, I told her about my past relationship with Ron Young, leaving out the attempt on his life. Soon after, she distanced herself from me, making me unavailable for dates and meetings. The message was very clear. She couldn't bear the thought of what could happen to a man who resorted to desperate measures to survive in prison. After several months of dating Casey, when our relationship became more serious and exclusive, I made the difficult decision to talk about my past. I knew it was better to tell the whole truth now than later. When I finished telling my story, Casey's blue eyes met mine and flashed with understanding. Sometimes, in order to get through difficult times, we do things that go against our values. It is important not to let external circumstances change your inner being. You have to forgive yourself and commit to being the same person you were before. You are Charles Klein again, a caring father and a decent man. If you find it difficult to forgive yourself for past mistakes, start this process today. I believe in you, Charles Klein, and there is no need for shame. Although Casey didn't express these feelings when she hugged me, her actions spoke volumes. Sometimes forgiveness with love is the key to a fulfilling life.